What's going on, everybody? Dr. Vasquez here, coming to you live. Most likely for the last time in 2025, because today's the 31st of December. That means this is the last of 2025. I just wanted to say thank you for all of you who have, let me say that more clearly. Thank you for all of you who have survived the year or the month or the last couple of years with me. Every once in a while, I'm sure I piss some of you off, and that's my job. So my job is not to try to piss people off, but I also have to risk saying things at times that I know are going to piss some people off. So if I say Donald Trump obviously has dementia, probably frontotemporal dementia, then I'm not trying to piss people off. It's just a medical fact. And if I say he has confabulation, etc. So thanks for staying with me. And if you got pissed off, that's just kind of the collateral of telling the truth sometimes. So, speaking of all that, one of my favorite sayings that I heard from a long time ago, and I have no idea who said this. I kind of think it may have been Henry Ford, but I'm not sure. But some business person a long time ago said, if two people are in business and they always agree, then one of them is unnecessary. And I've always kind of held that whenever I'm working with someone else, especially like in a work or leadership role or something like that. It's like, yeah, we're supposed to disagree. At least at first, like two people should have different opinions on certain topics, and then either reconcile those or agree to disagree, or eventually say, damn, thanks, I was totally wrong about that. And that can happen both ways. And it has happened for me. I remember on two different occasions, getting some advice from people or a group of people, like in an organization I was working in. And the very idea that they would kind of oppose my flow and opinion was kind of offensive to me at first, but then I realized they were right. So hopefully some of you have had that experience as well. I might do a review of 2025, just going back and looking at all the posts from the year and all the videos. Obviously, my page, intuitively, being called Healthy Thinking, is about health, but it's also about thinking. And so sometimes I talk about nutrition and mitochondria and dysbiosis and bacteria. And sometimes I talk about politics as related to social health, or, again, in the case of diagnosing a president with multiple personality disorders, like sociopathy, psychopathy, narcissistic personality disorder. Sometimes, looking at medical reality, or in this case, psychiatric reality, sometimes that pisses people off, but it's all about, being healthy enough to see reality for what it is. And that's a survival need. It's not like convenient. It's not like, maintaining conscious contact with reality is a survival requirement. And sometimes we can get away with not doing that, but most of the time we need to do it. So, again, my page is Healthy Thinking, and like it implies, I talk about health, and I also talk about, and health for me is like a really big topic. It could be vitamins, nutrition, exercise, brain health, neuroinflammation, but all the way to architecture. Because actually, I just read an article recently on this topic, but bad architecture actually causes brain damage. So I'll talk about that in the near future. You'll see a video on it. I'm sure I'll do a video. But also, as I've kind of touched on already in this spontaneous video, sometimes we have to see things for how it is, even if it's like political, and even if it's quote unquote our most cherished beliefs, because we just have to, always see things as they are, not as we want to see them or as we wish they were. So here's my list of topics. Number one was thank you for staying with me, even though I'm sure maybe at some time I pissed some of you off. Again, one of my favorite quotes, and it is worth repeating, is that if two people always agree, this was said in a business setting, but if two people are in business and they always agree with each other, then one of them is unnecessary. Somebody has to stir the pot and bring in some new ideas. I started to talk just then about 2025 because obviously this was a hell of a year with all the political just chaos that's going on. And if you were to look globally at the most chaotic country in the world, it would be the United States. And for those of us who are Americans, that's, not something that we enjoy saying, but it is just the truth. I mean, the United States is completely unhinged. As I said in one of my recent videos, the United States has become, it used to be a country. It used to be a landmass. And now it has become the personality of Donald Trump. So that's why it's totally unhinged from reality, and things change by the week. Speaking of this, to give you a really clear example, at the end of September 30th, Donald Trump and his administration published in the Federal Register, which is kind of like the news bulletin of the American government, they published that the United States was going to root out domestic terrorism, specifically by hunting down or being more vigilant against groups that were anti-fascist. Well, I mean, that's why we fought World War II, was against fascism. But also anti-Christian. And that was published in September 30th of 2025. I reviewed that in a video that may have seemed abstract to some of you at the time. So that was less than 2 weeks after Trump had published this anti-terrorist document in the Federal Register about Christian values. They published that September 30th. I reviewed it, at least in part, in passing, I should say, on October 12th, I believe. I'll show you the link and the page. And later that month, or certainly by November, they were killing people in international waters without appropriate justification. So, obviously the United States has a drug problem, but that's a problem that the United States has had for decades. But claiming that the United States has some type of legal or moral authority to kill people in international waters, supposedly for smuggling drugs in these little fishing boats. Those little fishing boats can't even get to the United States. So, I mean, anybody who says, oh yeah, well, we're killing drug smugglers. No, you're not. You're just killing people. The math doesn't add up to justify calling those people drug smugglers, because their little boats couldn't even make it. So, the video that I did on October 12th was titled something like, "You Can't Follow All of the Rules," and the subtitle, or the secondary title, was 3 Keys to Psychopathic Systems. And one of the ones that I exemplified in that conversation was the misuse of religion. Hitler aligned himself with the Christian Church. Francisco Franco, who was the dictator in Spain from about 1935 to 1975, who killed hundreds of thousands of people. And that's why Spain has more mass graves than any other country in Europe. It has the most mass graves of Europe. I think it's second only to Cambodia in the world for mass graves. And he did all that. He murdered people in his own country in the name of Christianity. So, if your religion or your interpretation of your religion allows you to kill people, then I would say your religion sucks. A lot of people who don't have religion live a lot better than justifying the murder of people based on a selective interpretation of, religious dictates. So, let's see if I wanted to say anything about anything else. I could do a review of 2025, like I said, but the one thing I wanted to mention is 2 things, I guess. It was a hell of a bad year for the United States. And to exemplify that, look at within 1 month going from, oh yeah, we're supporting Christian values and we're going to seek out terrorists because they're the anti-Christians, going from that to killing people in international waters on bogus. It's just political theater. I mean, it's just for votes and distraction. Oh yeah, votes and distraction from what? From, this pedophilic paper trail. And then they had to redact. So at one point Trump said he was going to release the documents. And then he said he wasn't going to release the documents. And then he said they were a Democratic hoax. And he even called Republicans stupid for trying to get the documents released. And then they got released, but they were all redacted. Well, it can't be something worthy of redaction and be a hoax. It's either a hoax, which means it's false, which means just let the papers go to the public because it's all just stupid stuff anyway, if it's a hoax. But it can't be a hoax and have to get redacted at the same time. So obviously that's another inconsistency, which is one of the clues that I mentioned before to psychopathic systems. So, yeah, I don't need to say that again. Let me see I wrote this in pencil, and it's on dark paper, so it's a little hard to read. Oh, yeah, so the last thing I want to talk about is the main topic for right now, and that is, I've mentioned several times in the past year that I was going to talk about Zarathustra, this book from Nietzsche. The title of the book is Thus Spoke Zarathustra, which is a refrain throughout the book. And I've had some difficulty moving forward with that just because I've been busy with other things. And sometimes busy with those things, and then sometimes drained from those things, and then not really having the creative juice to do something that's really poetic and beautiful, which is some type of representation of this book. And in the process of all that, I also became more clear on the difficulty of doing that, and I'll explain that right now. So this book, Thus Spoke Zarathustra, is actually 4 pieces of work in one book. And this explains, and I'll make this more clear in just a moment, but this explains why I thought initially, I thought to myself, well, I love this book so much, I would enjoy reviewing it, and I'll share that review with other people. So let me explain to you why I haven't been able to do that, other than the fact that I've just been busy, including some travel. But the reason's actually probably more profound than that, and that is, I want you to think of this book in 4 different ways. I want you to think of this book as the story, right? It is a story. It's a narrative story. Zarathustra is living in the mountains. He comes down the mountains. He's trying to share his wisdom with the population, and he goes through a bunch of stuff and the stories and all this kind of stuff. So one way to look at this book is simply by reading the prose of it and saying, yeah, the guy came down the mountain and he talked to people in the village. Okay. So one part, the easiest part, is the story. The second part of the book, or within the same work, of course, overlapping the story, is the philosophy. And when I initially thought that I would review the book and provide kind of a summary of it or my interpretation of it, I was looking at the book from those two levels, let's say. So on every page of the book, it has a story, and the story conveys Nietzsche's philosophy, which is also somewhat difficult to understand, especially if you haven't studied him and looked at other review works like I have. So we have the story, which is great. We have the philosophy, which requires some interpretation. But the other thing about this book is that Nietzsche had a very unique, and some would argue very masterful, use of language. Obviously, he wrote in German, and these are translations. This translation is from R.J. Hollingdale. I have the other one from Walter Kaufmann, and they're both arguably equally as good. Maybe the Kaufmann one is better, even though Kaufmann didn't understand Nietzsche as well as did Hollingdale. So does this have his name? This doesn't have Hollingdale's name on the front, but this particular edition, as I said before, was translated by R.J. Hollingdale. And Hollingdale definitely understood Nietzsche better, but maybe the Kaufmann translation is actually better. Anyway, remember, if you were to look at this book, you would find ultimately at least 4 levels to it. You would see the story, the prose story, nouns and verbs. Zarathustra lives in the mountains. He goes down the mountain. He talks to people in the village. Okay, that's the story. Through the nuance of understanding what's happening, then we get the philosophy. That would be very difficult to understand if you haven't studied Nietzsche literally for years. I guarantee you, no one is going to read this book and understand it completely just picking it up like a novel. It's not going to happen. As I started to say, Nietzsche had a very well-respected and unique and nuanced use of language, which is also represented in this book. I mean, he's just a master with his flow and rhythm and cadence with language. And that brings me to part 4, which is the real stumbling block in me or anyone else trying to explain this book to you. And that is, what I finally realized about this book is that, hear me out on this, it's a little bit related to what I just said, number 3, which is his use of language, because the book is quite poetic. But how could I, in this case, how could I discuss or describe the nature of that poetry? And here's how it came to me. Here's how it occurs to me now. This book is a love poem to life. That's why I've loved it for so long. And that's the real, I don't want to say it's the only value, because like if you were, let's say you were studying English or you wanted to be a good writer or a good poet, you could still read this book just to see how he uses language. So you can read the story, like you could pick up this book and read the story. Okay, he's in the mountains, he goes down the mountains, he talks to people in the village. Okay, that's the story. That's part one. Part three that in my list was his unique use of language. And you can pick that up just by picking up the book and reading it. You're not going to get part two starting cold on this book. No one's going to understand the philosophy of this book just unless you've studied him before. And that's the value that I wanted to provide, was saying, hey, I've looked at his work now for, 30 years, and I'm going to tell you what he means when he says this. That's kind of the philosophy part. But again, part number 4 is, this is a love poem. This is a love poem to life. And that's why, maybe even as I got older or whatever, that's why I've loved this book so much, is because it's so positive. And in a world of pedophiles and corruption and presidential pardons for drug traffickers and all this chaos that we live in, even under organizations like the World Health Organization, which is clearly an anti-human organization right now, this book, told through the story, the philosophy, and the artistry of his use of language, this book is a human positive love poem. What, 400 pages or something? 330 pages. It is a positive, pro-human, pro-life, in the broadest sense of what that really means, pro-art, pro-philosophy, pro-everything. It's a love poem to life. And that's why, as I would think to myself, oh, well, how can I, present this book to people in a way that they'll get it and kind of get the message? I mean, no one can read a poem for you. And so if I were to try to do the other 3 things, tell you the story, interpret the philosophy, try to show you, maybe some nuance of how he uses language or something, I can't even show you that. I mean, no one can explain art to you and give you the value that you would get if you actually exposed yourself to the art. So, for example, I was just thinking of this. If I go to a museum and look at something beautiful, and then I come back and I say, hey, I'm going to explain to you what I saw in the museum, and that's going to provide you approximate value to the real experience. I mean, that's just, obviously, that can't happen, What am I going to do? Am I going to say, oh, well, he used color, and he used detail, and I'm thinking of a specific painting I saw in the, what is it, the Prado? Yeah, I think it's the Prado Museum in Madrid. It's the famous one with the little dwarfs in it. Because the royal families were so inbred, obviously they started to amplify their regressive genetic traits, one of which is dwarfism. So, I can't, no one can, and you wouldn't expect me to be able to, go to a museum and then come back and tell you how it was and have that be anywhere near the actual experience. It's just not going to happen, right? So, and likewise, I feel like the same is true of this. If I tell you the story, interpret the philosophy, give you some examples of his artistic use of language, that's still not the same as you exposing yourself to a love poem written to life. And it is that. And in fact, there's no way I'm going to be able to find this right now. But toward the end of the story, I mean, this would be radical if I found it. I'm not even going to say that it's possible. But I guess I'm looking for it. Toward the end of the story, see, this is something you would only understand, or anyone, this is something a person could only understand once they've gotten to the end of the story. So, at the end of the story, let's see if I can find it. At the end of the story, Zarathustra is actually talking to life. He's talking to life itself, or life herself. And she, I guess it's a she, life is actually kind of rebuking him and kind of trying to verbally punish him for kind of not living up to his responsibilities, basically. Anyway, but again, that's an example, a concrete example of what I mean when I say that the book is kind of a dialogue or a celebration of life At the end of the book, it is actually a dialogue with life. I hadn't thought of that when I started this video, but anyway, hopefully some of you will understand. And again, the book is a story. It's a cool story. The book is philosophy. The book is very well written because Nietzsche had a very unique use of language. And that's why sometimes when people start reading Nietzsche, they can't go back to people like Kant, or Kierkegaard, or Descartes, or Spinoza, once you really read Nietzsche, especially this book, Zarathustra, reading other philosophers becomes very difficult. And that's also a well-known philosophy, and Nietzsche himself talked about that. But again, the book is the story, the philosophy, his artistic use of language, but it is a love poem to life and a celebration of life. And that can't be necessarily conveyed, especially if I were to review the book, part by part, like, hey, here's chapter 1, here's chapter 2. That would make it even more difficult. Even though, again, I may try to do something with that. I'm not saying I'm giving up on the project. I'm just articulating the complexity of such a project when a single work has so many different levels. I don't know if I would say the same thing about Ayn Rand's Fountainhead, for example. Let me see what I can say about it. So it's the story. She has her philosophy, which is, you can kind of take it or leave it, but she definitely wrote it for a reason. Her use of language, talking about Ayn Rand, her use of language is very unique. In particular, her scathing sarcasm. Talking about her Fountainhead, that book is dripping in sarcasm. So if I would say, Zarathustra from Nietzsche is dripping in love for life. And maybe it drips kind of a yellow golden color. But if I had to say something, analogous about Ayn Rand's Fountainhead, I would say that book is dripping in burgundy red, blood red sarcasm. Let's see what else. I wouldn't say, and no one would say that The Fountainhead is a love poem for life. It's not a love poem. It's sarcasm from page 1 all the way to page whatever, 800 or however many pages it has. It's huge. It's a huge book. So hopefully all that makes sense for my last video of the year. Again, thank you. If I pissed some of you off somewhere along the way, that wasn't my specific intention, even though it has to happen at some times. Because if two people always agree, then I guess they're either very lucky, very, very good friends, or one of them is unnecessary. 2025, as I already said, was a crazy year for the U.S. Within the scope of 1 month, your government, now personalized by the, personalized or personified, now personified by the personality of someone who appears to have frontotemporal dementia, went from praising and defending Christian values to killing innocent people in international waters. All that happened within about 1 month. That was crazy. But that's why I did that video. The video, again, was you can't follow all the rules and 3 keys to psychopathic systems. And it was a little bit nebulous or vague or ambiguous or amorphous or whatever. But I also nailed it. I was totally right. 2026 predictions. That's the only thing on my list that I haven't talked about. And the United States is probably going to have a new president in 2026. I don't think Trump's health is going to sustain the year, and certainly not 3 more years. I think he had another stroke. I think previously he appears to have had a TIA, which is a kind of a temporary stroke of fewer than 24 hours, less than 24 hours. More recently, he either had another TIA or it was a legit permanent stroke. He's starting to slur his words much worse. His frontal lobes, which are kind of the area of nuance and social restriction, they're just failing him, and that's why he's, insulting people even more radically than he did before, more aggressively, I should say, and inappropriately. Calling a American journalist a pig is not appropriate. So as he loses, this frontotemporal restraint, he's going to be more unhinged, and that is what we have seen the entire year, and arguably it's getting worse. So I fully expect that he will either have a bigger stroke or another health problem this year. He's in horrible health. I'm not saying anything radical. I'm just looking at the data. He's obviously obese. He's got, appears to be, well, he's just got a lot of health problems. And adding all those health problems together with the stress of whatever his job is or whatever he does. I know he plays a lot of golf, but I guess he works at times doing something. I just don't, from a medical standpoint, I don't think he's going to make it the year. And I also don't think he's going to make it politically unless his handlers do a better job of handling him. So that's my prediction. If I'm wrong, I'll give everybody a free gift. And if I'm right, then maybe I just exposed the obvious. But I think I'm right on this one. I think I've been right in most of my videos, even though, again, I know that some of you maybe don't want to hear it. Like I've said, you got to get internationally flexible. You might want to, or you should think about, taking action to learn a second language. The situation in the United States economically and politically within the country, internationally, politically with other countries, everything is just bad. So you have to be aware of that by now. And I realize some people are not, and they want to keep defending him. And some guy sent me a message publicly the other day. He said I had some problem with Trump, and that I was wrong, and that Trump was going to be the greatest president the United States has ever had. That's not happening. So, people can have whatever fantasies they want, but the reality that we all need to appreciate is the United States is in really fragile condition right now. And so is Trump's health. And so, either politically or medically, I don't think he's going to be the president throughout 2026. That's just my American opinion, speaking as an American under the American Constitution of free speech. So I hope you're all doing well, and I hope you all have a great year. Take care. Bye-bye.
Nietzsche's entire concept of higher humanity relates directly and intimately to culture and its significance. Only culture and the creativity it involves can render human life meaningful and worth living. Otherwise, our existence is as bleak and senseless as Schopenhauer says it is. It points to what Nietzsche calls the great conception of man, that man becomes the transfigurer of existence when he learns to transfigure himself. This is how mere life is transformed into culture.